The UN says Ukraine may have violated international agreements if it's confirmed Kyiv used military helicopters with the organization's markings in its crackdown in the east of the country. This is RT International coming to you live from Moscow with me, Marina Jashi. The UN is examining reports of government forces in Ukraine using helicopters bearing the organization's insignia in a military operation in the east of the country. If confirmed, it would mean Kyiv is violating its agreement with the United Nations, the organization said. The helicopters were seen during heavy fighting near the city of Kramatorsk, where several paratroopers were killed, with casualties also reported among anti-government activists. Well, RT's Irina Galushko is there for us.
There is a video that was filmed by the crew of the Life News channel, which allegedly shows one of the 3 helicopters involved in the incident around Kramatorsk, and it bears the UN insignia. RT has contacted the United Nations for comment and have gotten a response. Now, according to the organization, the country that has the equipment that has the UN insignia on it is supposed to strip it after the equipment is no longer involved in an official UN mission. Moreover, using the UN identifiers is only allowed on such mission, and the crackdown in Ukraine isn't. And now the Life News crew that has filmed the helicopters earlier came under attack from the National Guard and the Ukrainian army troops. They were caught in the gunfire seemingly when the fighting was over. Luckily, no one was hurt in that incident, and we have contacted the Life News correspondent.
When the military vehicles were gone, we tried to enter the village to see if there were casualties among the locals and if anyone needed help. But when we got close, we came across an APC with a Ukrainian flag on it and armed people dressed in black. We were in a car with a sign TV on it, but they started shooting in our direction. We turned around and drove to safety in order not to provoke them. Locals are in horror. They cannot get home. Many took shelter in the basements of their homes. There was indiscriminate shooting, and many bullets hit windows, so it was impossible to hide from them in the house itself.
This is far from being the first incident involving a journalist working in the eastern Ukraine. Unfortunately, a journalist working for RT's own video agency, Rupley, has been caught in crossfire just last week. He was severely wounded in the stomach while filming a storming by the Ukrainian army of the police headquarters. He was wearing a bulletproof vest. However, the journalist believes that there was absolutely no way that he could have been mistaken for a combatant. Nevertheless, he was shot, and Kyiv authorities would not allow a medical evacuation plane to land in order to transport him for treatment for 3 days. RT has sounded the alarm with international journalism watchdogs over the situation in Ukraine, which becomes increasingly more dangerous for journalists. European Federation of Journalists has issued their condemnation, saying that absolutely no violence should be used against people who are only armed with cameras, and that reinforces a previous statement made in relation to the situation with journalists in Ukraine.
Concern that journalists have become overt targets for the principal factions in the current crisis in Ukraine. Journalists representing outlets from various countries, including the United States and Russia, have been detained or denied entry visas, while others have been threatened and beaten. Reporters for international outlets are treated as intruders, and even Ukrainian journalists are abused as traitors or commodities and kidnapped for profit schemes.
Now, even though the self-defense troops have already said that they're ready to lay down arms if Ukrainian army leaves the region, however, Kyiv authorities are insisting that what's happening here is an anti-terrorism operation and have so far refused to withdraw their troops.
Russia's foreign minister also touched on the ongoing military operation in eastern Ukraine and the alleged use of helicopters with UN markings in his interview with Bloomberg TV. And Sergei Lavrov says stopping the offensive is essential if the dialogue with the regions that Kyiv is now initiating is to succeed.
No violence means, first of all, the end of this anti-terrorist operation. You cannot invite people to sit down and talk as you continue to shell them from artillery, from mortars, from fighter planes, helicopters, and we certainly want to understand how it happened that the UN logo, UN painted helicopters were used against the protesters in the east and the south. The United Nations already expressed its very deep concern. But my point is that if you want to promote national dialogue, You don't do it while you're fighting demonstrators who do not agree with your government.
And Russia's chief diplomat was not only answering questions, but also asked some of his own, specifically addressing the West's constant threat of sanctions against Moscow based on dubious reasons.
If the West, just for the sake of revenge, is ready to sacrifice its reputation as a reliable partner for the entire world economy, then it's up to them to decide. The problem is they tell us, well, if you do not change your policy, we will hurt you even more. My question is, what is the change you need? There is no answer. They started by saying a couple of months ago, you must not invade Ukraine. We were not going to invade Ukraine. We are not going to invade Ukraine. Then they said, if you do not call for the cancellation of these referendums on 11th of May. So Putin said that, you know, it's up to the people to decide. But we believe that given the intention of OSCE to start a dialogue, it would be useful to postpone them. Now they say, if the elections on the 25th of May do not take place for any reason, Russia would be to blame. Isn't it ridiculous?
Well, this so-called anti-terrorist operation is now drawing condemnation from within the Ukrainian parliament, and members of the party of regions have addressed the interim president, demanding that the operation be stopped immediately, saying it is in fact a military campaign leading to bloodshed and mass killings. The deputies have promised to appeal to international organizations and courts in order to have these events investigated, and they blame the coup-appointed authorities of dragging the country down into civil war.